Hello everyone, thank you for joining today's Lunch and Learn, served to you by the FileMaker team at Cross IT. Before we dig in, remember that you have a chance to win lunch on us if you leave a comment or ask a question during the live stream. When you do that, please be sure to include your email address because we need some way to contact you so that we can get that gift card sent out. All right, so our topics of our Lunch and Learn, they typically fall into two categories. The first one is where there's a technique or an area where we feel that there's some information that we would like to convey to you, so that's the topic of the day. The second category is just questions that we've been asked, and we realize that, well, if one person has that question, others may have that question as well, so we try to answer that question, and that's where today's topic falls in. Is it's one of those questions that we want to answer, and that question is that when you're writing a script to generate a report, you need to make it, typically you want to make it a dynamic script because you're not always looking at the same file set every single time. You want to be able to report, especially over a date range, possibly for the current month, current week, previous week. You get the idea. And so you need some way to be able to collect that date or that date range for that report. And so we were asked the question, well, how do we do that? And so what we're going to do is over the next 30 minutes, we're going to explore three different methods that are there. There may be more than that because that's the beauty of the FileMaker platform, is if there's one way to do something, there's probably 5 or 6, but we're just going to worry about 3 at this point. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the code and take a look at this. This is going to be a little bit more of just a live coding session as we talk through some stuff. I've got a few slides just to help kind of make the points and what we're going to be talking about, but then the most of it is just writing a script and doing some testing. And so the question was, how do I get a date? Well, obviously, if you have looks like Chris Hemsworth, that certainly helps, but that's not the kind of date that we're talking about here. And so we want to be able to collect that date or that date range easily for the user and then apply it and then use it in our script. So let's go ahead and take a look at what I call the old school FileMaker method. This method predates my use of the FileMaker platform, which goes back over 20 years now. And what that is that you would simply create your script, but then during the execution of the script, you would pause the script to allow the user to enter the find mode criteria manually before they then execute the find. All right, and it was typically, you could either stay on the layout that the user was using, or if you wanted to, you could go to a specific layout for entering that information. Then you would pause the script as you enter find mode, and then once the script is resumed, then it performs the find, and then you would return to the original layout if you had switched layouts before. So let's just take a look at what that method looks like. So here we've got just a list of contacts that are just randomly generated. Nobody in here really exists. It's just all fake names and addresses and things like that. But we want to find contacts over a range, and we're just going to use the birth date because that's the easiest. And so what that would be is you would just go in, perform the find. You'll notice that in this example, I'm switching to a different layout because the date of birth was not on the original layout. You'll see that we're definitely in find mode based on the buttons that are up there in the status area. And we can also tell that the script is paused because we've got some buttons over here that we can use to continue or cancel. And because we're looking at birth dates, we'll just say we want to start with everybody that was born in the year 2000. And then when I perform the find and continue, then we see we brought back, we've got 568 records, and now we're looking at that found set. So that method certainly works, but there are a couple drawbacks to this method. I'm sure you've probably either spotted them or if you actually experienced them yourself, is that obviously this is not just for dates. If I would put something in for the name or the city or the state, that would also be included in that find operation. So it's not just the date. The other thing is that because the script is paused, I can continue. Right now, as a user, I also have the option to cancel. So what happens if I cancel? Well, if I cancel the script, it doesn't take me back to the original layout. It leaves me where the script took me, and that may not be a desired behavior depending on what the layout is that you're using and those kinds of things. So you want to make sure that there's a way to get the user back to the proper layout. And so, like I said, this is probably the least used method, at least from my standpoint, but it's just good to know that it is there because it may do exactly what you need it to do, and so that's where you can go ahead and make use of that process. All right, so what's the a newer method? Well, the newer method would be to open a card or a dialog window. And what that does is that is a window that's going to retain focus until the user proceeds to proceed or cancel the action. And this method typically use some global variables to capture the find criteria in those globals, so you don't actually enter the find mode until you're actually ready to execute the find. The nice thing about a card window or a dialog window is that it's going to allow you to do some formatting of the layout using the solutions theme and stuff like that, which just kind of ups the value and just the appearance of the layout that your users are probably going to appreciate. And then typically the method that I use, I don't know that everybody does it this way, but it also allows me to just split the script into multiple pieces instead of pausing a single script. In the old school method, if you will, the script was paused. Well, if FileMaker shuts down, that script was left in an incomplete state, and depending on what all it was doing, that may not be desirable. So by using this card or dialog window, you're able to have scripts that run and stop until the user clicks the next button. So let's go ahead and dive into that. So we are going to start here with our same list of contacts. The first thing we need to do is we need to create a couple of global fields. All right, so we're going to go ahead and dive into the Manage Database to do that. So this particular table, we've got contacts. We've also got a variables table. A lot of times that's what I'll use a variables table when I'm creating those global fields for this type of thing. You can always, of course, drop it into your contacts if you want to, but we're just going to go ahead and put it into our globals, and we're just going to go global date begin, make that a date, and go ahead and create it, and then date end. And I know we had talked about a starting date and an ending date, but I usually use the word begin, so that way the start date becomes before the end date when I'm sorting. So then the only other thing we have to do here is just go in and make sure that those are global fields here. All right, so we have our inputs. Okay, now we need a layout, so let's go ahead and jump into layout mode here. We'll go ahead and create a new layout. Okay, it's going to be in the variables. I'm going to put it, just call it date entry card for now. Jump over here, we want to go ahead and make it a form. All right, and obviously we don't need it to be that large, so we're just going to go ahead and decrease the size. You see, and then because we are using the theme, now I can just come over here, grab those two fields, bring them over here. I'll just clean that up so I'll feel better about myself. All right, and then let's go ahead and we'll give it a title. Shrink that up a little bit, and we'll just let that float here. All right, so that's good. We've got an area here to enter the information. We'll go ahead and throw a couple of buttons on our layout. And this is cancel. that, and this is find. Okay, so we've got our layout now. So let's get back. We'll save those changes. Get back to where we were. All right, and now we can start looking at the script. Okay, and I've already got the scripts kind of started, but we're going to get to fill in a few of the blanks here. And you'll see, like I said, this is where I've broken it down into three, where I've got a start, a cancel, and a continue. Okay, and so the first thing we want to do is, for the start, all we have to do is just go to that card window. So all we have to do is just select the layout that I created. The nice thing about using the card window here of these choices is that you don't have to worry about the size, because it's going to pick up on the size of the layout that you've made. It's also going to go ahead and center it. It'll do some shading and things here with the options, and also you have the option as to whether the window can be closed with the close button. Now we're going to go ahead and leave this turned on for right now, just in case we do something where we get stuck, but eventually we're going to want to be able to uncheck this option so that the user is forced to select either the cancel or the continue buttons that we've provided, rather than just being able to dismiss that window. All right, so that's good for the start. Save that. The cancel is very simple. It's just a close window script, so that's pretty easy. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll just do some testing here now. So if I go ahead and I just do find contacts, you see it brings up this nice little window that I can go ahead and enter my dates. And see, this is why we do the X. I forgot to make a change. Actually, let's do it this way. We're going to open up a new window, and we'll switch it to the one that we're editing. Resize it, that way I don't have to keep jumping back and forth. So we'll just move that down here to the bottom, and then we're just going to go ahead and attach those buttons to the scripts. We want that to be the cancel, and then of course the find is going to be the one that continues. Okay, so we will save that, come over here, go back into browse mode. All right, so now when I do get that, and if I hit cancel, then the window's dismissed. I haven't gone into find mode. I haven't left the user anywhere where they don't want to be. So that's a very nice method of being able to do that. All right, so now we want to go ahead and take a look at the script that's actually going to do the work for us. All right, so here we go. And really the only thing that we need to do, other than the find operation, which I've gone ahead and kind of built for us, is we just want to kind of verify the data. And then obviously if because we're collecting a date, that if is empty, if there's no starting date, that's going to be a problem. And we'll just show custom dialog. Not going to worry about the spelling. All right, the same thing, if the is the end date empty. All right, and we're just going to go ahead and duplicate that. All right, so that if either is empty, it's going to give me a message, but if there is information is pulled in, and what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do this for right now. Let's go ahead and switch my placeholders out for the actual information. Okay, so let's save that. All right, so now when we go into find our contacts, if I try to find, it says your date field is empty. All right, so if I put that in as one. Well, that's not very good, so that's good. It's caught that error. All right, and now when I perform the find, you see it has pulled up 3,300 records. So it appears to be working the way that it should. And so that's very good news for us. And obviously, there's a few more things that we would be able to do here if we jump back into our script. I'm just looking at a couple of those things here right now, but we could also make sure that the beginning date is before the ending date. Also, the one thing that we can do is that if the dates are the same, obviously we would want to change what our date range is to where it would just be a specific date. And so a couple things there just to kind of clean that up a little bit, but I think you get the idea. That's as far as what we can do with the script. Now what we would be able to do here is that because we are on an actual layout down here, one of course our control style options is we could make this a drop down calendar, include the icon, make that a little bit wider, do the same thing here. Save that, and then when we come back here to our main layout and go to find the contacts, obviously this has remembered from before, but if I wanted to change that and say go back to 1984 and run my find again, just because it's a calendar picker, date picker, that becomes a little bit more obvious for the user as to what information or what inputs we are expecting with our script. So that's a pretty good idea of what's possible when you're collecting the date with that method. And again, depending on the number of validation checks that you're doing, you really dial in. Obviously, with the we only added 2 fields, but you could make that find window as complex as you need it to be for the user. So it just works. So that's a very nice method. Now the other method that we want to look at is actually a little bit older because the card windows have not been around that very long. I love using card windows, but every once in a while that is not an option, because if you're already working in a card window, you can't open up a card inside a card. So you need to be able to collect that kind of information a different way if you're running a report. And that's what brings us to the custom dialog box. And that's where you're using the custom dialog box now to collect the starting date and the ending date. What you have the ability to do here is you can put it into local variables now, which is something that's relatively new, rather than having to use those global fields, which is nice because then it doesn't clutter up your database tables with just these extra fields. It does keep your find operation in a single script now, because we're able to use, you'll pause the script, but because of how the script is paused with the custom dialog, it's not quite as confusing for the user as the old school method, again, depending on their familiarity with FileMaker. Now the only disadvantage, of course, is you lose some of the formatting abilities that you would have versus the card window approach, because it's just a custom dialog. You're also limited to 3 inputs and 3 buttons, where if you're using a card window, kind of the sky's the limit as far as the screen real estate that you can use for that particular card. So that's something you're going to have to weigh the pros and cons. Like I said, where I found myself using this approach is when I was actually generating the report in a card window, and then needed to be able to collect this date. All right, so let's take a look at that. So again, we have our window with our contacts. So let's go ahead and jump over to the script again, which this is here is just a simple a single script where we want to show the information. So we'll go ahead and edit that custom dialog box. All right, and so this is dates. We'll just put something in there. All right, so that looks good. Now what we have to do over here is put some information in for our input fields. So we want to go ahead and you'll notice here we can search the fields in contacts, we can search the fields in variables. So if I wanted to use the global fields, I can certainly do that. But we now have this ability to use a variable. And so that's what we're going to go ahead and use for this option. And I'm just going to go ahead and abbreviate that. And then that is the starting date. And then this is $date end. All right, so we got date begin, date end. All right, so that looks good. I am going to go ahead and switch these around. I just like having cancel as the default button when I'm doing this kind of stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and switch that. Click OK. Now I do have to do a little bit of logic here, because what happens if they do hit cancel? So we'll do if get last message choice equals 1. That's cancel, so they're going to exit the script. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and test that much of it to see how we're doing. So if we go ahead and click Find Contacts, again here we got our custom dialog instead of going to that card window. We're still not in Find mode like we were in the first example, but we can go ahead and put in our dates, and if I hit cancel, nothing else happens. So it looks like we're moving in the right direction. So let's go ahead and get back over here. All right, now one of the things that the global fields allow us to do is, because it's defined as a date, you can actually enable some of the validation so you know that you're definitely getting a date back. That's another thing where the date picker allows us to do, is that because they're selecting from that calendar drop down, we know it's going to be formatted as a date. But that's one of the things you don't really have the option to do here, okay? And so one of the ways that I've worked around this is I actually put my dialog box inside a loop, and then I don't exit the loop until everything is satisfactory. All right, so what does that look like? So let's go ahead and we'll put some space here at the top. We're going to go ahead and add that loop in. Put the end of our loop down here at the bottom. All right, so it goes in, jumps right into that portion. Okay. Now we want to exit the loop if there are certain conditions. All right. And so let's go ahead and examine what those conditions will be. Well, if it's not is empty, and that would be our date begin, and all right, so it's similar to the conditions that we had before. So just making sure that those values are not empty. All right, and if they're not empty, we're going to go ahead and exit the script. Okay, so we already got an exit condition if we're canceling. All right. And then if we don't exit the script, or don't exit the loop rather, we just go ahead and okay. All right, so let's go ahead and see what that looks like. All right, and if I go ahead and hit OK, and it says something's wrong with the date. Now what it does is it brings me right back to the area where I'm going to go ahead and enter those dates. All right, so it hasn't let me get somewhere where I shouldn't be. It's still asking for the dates. So if I put one slash, and all right, but you get the idea. All right, so what more do we need to do? Okay, well, one of the things I said, that because, by their nature, local variables, global variables, those are stored as text. So it is possible for the user to enter, a text string or something that's definitely not a date. Okay, and so the way that we're able to check that is if we go back in here to our exit condition. All right, there is a function called isValid that returns a 0 if the data isn't valid, or otherwise it returns a true. So what we do is we just ask, is it invalid, is valid, but then we get as date our variable. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy this for sake of time, and I just need to make that end. Okay, and so we've got they're not empty, they're valid as dates, and then the last thing that we probably want to check for is that our end date our beginning date is less than or equal to our end date. So that we make sure that we've got the proper range. Okay, and then we can come down here and let's go ahead and replace my placeholders. All right, so that looks good. All right, so let's test that. So we're just going to go back to the first one that we started with because we know there should be about 500. All right, and there's our 568. So it looks like, as far as that goes, the logic is working. Now, of course, one of the other things that we're able to do here is, if something is wrong, we may want to tell the user. So we're just going to go ahead and add a case statement here. We'll go ahead and put our space there. So this is kind of like the opposite of what we had for our exit condition. Okay. And we'll go with the end date. Sorry, so I mess up all my typing. We just want to copy that line and switch it for our end date. And then get that in there. Okay. All right, so let's see how we did. All right, so we go over here, we start it. And if I hit OK, it says, oh, okay, so that's working. So we're going to put something in there. Okay, so it knows that the dates fall after each other. So that's good. So let's just try this. All right, so it's recognizing that our dates are not valid. All right, and so that's exactly what we want to have it do, is we want to have it, validate everything, let us know if it's not valid so the user gets the proper things in there, and then they can come down here and perform their find. So that is a somewhat quick overview of the three methods that you're able to use. And of course, we have options, some additional things that we would be able to do. Let's see if we have any questions here. Looks like we do have a couple questions. And the first question is, what method do I prefer? My preferred method is probably the card or the card window method. only because you do have that extra ability to do some formatting and make that window that card that you're using to collect the find criteria as fancy and as nice looking as the rest of the solution, because you're tied in with that same theme and everything. But I'm one of those people, is you make sure you're doing the right thing at the right time. So if I need to do something a different way, I don't only do it that way, but that is certainly my preferred method. All right. Let's see, what more could we add to the process? Great question. Probably, so obviously in the card window method, we did not do all of the checks that we added in here in our custom dialog, where we're looking at, are the dates valid? Does the starting date fall before, the ending date? A couple things that could be done, obviously, is that, you may be working with a report that's only for a single day. And so you would want to not necessarily make the user enter in but the same starting date and ending date. So you would make allowances to allow that ending date to be empty, would be one of the things. And then you would also probably change this calculation down here, where I'm just kind of putting my search criteria together, where if there's a range, you get the 3 dots. If not, you only get the single date value, of course. So there would be a couple things there. The other thing that you would want to possibly consider, and this would work with either the dialog method or the card window method, is that you would build it in such a way that you could call it from multiple scripts, because a starting date and ending date is a pretty common thing, but you wouldn't want to have to repeat this logic in 5 or 10 or 20 different scripts. So you would be able to use some type of parameters, both to pass information to the script as a starting point, because it might be a case where that, okay, if they're using current week, previous week, current month, previous month, you're able to calculate all of those values. So you can kind of preload those things based on what the user has selected. And then it's just a matter of them confirming what date range they want in case they do need to run it for a custom range. So you could pass that information, as well as like what the report's being run for, and maybe some of the messaging that pops up. And then all you would need to do is, once you've collected that date range, you would return it back as a result from your subscript that's collecting the range to the actual script that's going to be running the find operation. So that would probably be the next couple of things that I would consider. So that is all that we have for you today. I hopefully it answered the question. If you had that question, or maybe it answered the question that you didn't even know that you had, which is always a good thing too. So hopefully we passed along some knowledge here. Let's go ahead and take a look at a few upcoming events just to draw your attention to. First off is that the FileMaker, which is the Pittsburgh FileMaker Developer Group, returns on the first Wednesday evening in February after taking our customary midwinter break. So if you're in the Pittsburgh area and want to talk FileMaker with like-minded individuals, please consider joining our next meetup on Wednesday, February 2nd. That is at 7 p.m. And then due to some scheduling issues at our regular venue, this meeting will be held in an online-only format. You can get all of the details and sign up for the meeting by visiting our website at www.crossit.com. And then our next Lunch and Learn is scheduled for Wednesday, February 16th. We hope you can make plans to join us as we dig a little deeper into another topic surrounding the Claris FileMaker platform. All right, again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here today. We certainly appreciate your time. If you like what you saw and heard, please click the thumbs up and share this video. If you haven't subscribed, we humbly ask that you do so. You can also hit the bell to get notified when a new Lunch and Learn is going live. And as you saw, some of the content presented during our Lunch and Learns is a result of your questions. So if you have a suggestion for a future topic, or if you have a question of your own to a specific FileMaker problem that has you stumped, please submit those topics and questions by emailing us at nutshell@crossit.com. Your idea or question may be a featured topic at a future Lunch and Learn. So from all of us here at Cross IT, we are glad to have served you. Have a great day.